Philip Van Cleve, VCDL, Mr. Chair. Well, it's blatantly unconstitutional. In fact, here in Virginia, we have a stay on 18 to 20-year-olds purchasing a handgun. They're stayed from having to go through the universal background check because a dealer cannot transfer a handgun to somebody under 21 under federal law. And the judge said that means they cannot get a handgun at all. Therefore, this is unconstitutional. It's got a stay going on that. Other states are having the same thing where courts are overturning these exact same bans because certainly, I guarantee people from 18 to 20 years old back when this country was founded and well beyond the Civil War were all able to own firearms. So there's no historical precedent for this. Thank you very much. We oppose.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. As Mr. Van Cleve stated, the 18 to 21-year-old prohibition on firearms is unconstitutional. In fact, a judge in Virginia just recently ruled that the federal prohibition on sales of handguns to 18, 19, and 20-year-olds was unconstitutional. So in passing this bill, you will be costing the taxpayers money to defend this bill because it will be challenged and it will be found to be unconstitutional.
Mr. Chairman, could Mr. Benjamin comment? We heard some things about a recent case, and
that's
I've
correct,
not read
Mr.
it.
Chairman. Yeah. The recent decision I'm familiar with came from the U.S. Federal District Court based here in Richmond, and the opinion was handed down last May of 2023. And the case involved a challenge by several under 21, above 18-year-olds, challenging their right, challenging a statute that prohibited, a federal statute that prohibited their purchasing a firearm. The holding of the court was basically that this was a violation of the Second Amendment. And the court reasoned that the right to bear arms included the right to purchase or acquire firearms. The court found that 18 and 19 and 20-year-olds were part of the people referenced in the Second Amendment, and that there was no historical tradition analogous to the statutes that were being challenged. In short, the court concluded that the government had not met their burden of showing that the restrictions on purchasing guns by 18 to 20-year-olds was part of the nation's historical tradition. That opinion, that decision is on appeal to the Fourth Circuit. I've said before that the state of the law concerning Second Amendment analysis is in flux. It's virtually impossible to say that any particular proposed statute is unconstitutional. We won't know that until the U.S. Supreme Court rules or the Fourth Circuit rules. But you should know that in this, what I would say is a very well-reasoned opinion from the U.S. District Court, this most likely, under the current analysis of Second Amendment, would be held unconstitutional.
Chairman.
Senator Stewart.
I mean, our counsel has told us it is clearly unconstitutional, and we've had, or most likely is clearly unconstitutional. I'm sorry not to put words in his mouth. And I thought this body didn't adopt laws that we believed might be unconstitutional. So with that, I'd move to pass the bill by.
Okay.
Substitute motion to report and refer to finance.
Okay, it's been a substitute motion to report and re-refer the bill to finance. And no further discussion. Clerk will open the roll.
Ayes 9, no 6.
Senator Salim, you reported, or you're off to finance.
Philip Van Cleve, VCDL, Mr. Chair. Well, it's blatantly unconstitutional.
Hello, everybody. Welcome, and thanks for joining us. What you just saw was one of the many torture chambers that we had to sit through in this session. Philip Van Cleve, our president, called it a constitution-free zone. I tend to think he's right, but a lot of what we heard in committee hearings this session were quotes from the Gun Violence Archive. So we invited Paul Glasco. He has a YouTube channel called Legally Armed America, and he checked into some of the statistics on that gun violence archive. So we're going to let him tell us about that. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, guys. Good to see you all. Yeah, Pat, I probably started looking into the gun violence archive better part of mid last year. And the reason why is because obviously I feel like we handle facts and things like that pertain to firearms pretty decently. However, there's not a lot of organizations out there doing any real groundwork for us to supply stats to us. And while I was looking at a lot of these different types of media organizations, I noticed the GVA Gun Violence Archive a couple of times as well. And it seemed like this was the standard that everybody was using to say, all right, this is what's happening in America. And the more you dig, the worse it looks when you go to the Gun Violence Archive's own website. They actually provide, when you click on any of the things out there, they provide a breakdown of the incident, which is typically or a link or something like that. And they're actually pretty good about sharing those incidents to where you can go straight to the source and read what happened on your own. And the thing that always got me, it started out with school shootings because we knew that it wasn't the level of school shootings they kept reporting, but mass shootings also. Those are the two that I really focused on. And papers coming out were not indicative of what you knew really happening out there. Shooting was the one that I'm kind of sticking to now because I'll get more into this later. Gun Violence Archive has actually agreed to, and they've done it, rename quote school shootings. It's not named that anymore. Mark, I had a conversation with Mark 3 weeks ago. Mark went with Gun Violence Archive, and apparently this was a mistake. It was not supposed to say school shootings, although it has for I don't know how long. That's I knew there wasn't 648 school shootings or whatever the numbers were. So in digging, most of them were guns in a backpack. No trigger was pulled, no shot was fired. This doesn't were at a parking lot at 1 a.m. in the morning across the street where people were playing basketball. They would call those school shootings as well. So I knew the numbers were fictitious and inflated probably for the wrong reason. Now, Mark's claim is that that was done in error. I find that hard to believe because those numbers were actually being cited as school shootings. So they were getting mileage out of those. But as of probably 2 weeks ago, Wednesday, it no longer reads school shootings. It says school incidents. And I'm personally proud that we're the ones that pushed them. And actually, Mark reached out to me because my viewers hammered his organization so hard after I put my report out on January and February's numbers that he contacted me and he said that a lot of my viewers were a-holes. Were correct. And he fixed that. So I have to give him kudos on that. At least whether it was a real admission or not, he did fix that. However, the mass shootings are still out there. And um, my my desire has always been that there's an issue out there. People are shooting each other, right? If we can't find the true root cause and we can't determine how we got there before the gun was even involved, how the human mind got there. Somebody made a decision to either attack people or carry a gun in order to attack people. And that's always been my thought process. And I break down these shootings not in one big giant bucket. I break them down in confrontational shootings, which is what most of them are. There where people have a beef with one another, gang related, people get in a fight, they're carrying a gun, they shoot each other. That's not the same as what the news media, when the news media puts out a headline that says mass shooting, what do we think of? We think of a family sitting in a food court and some random guy busts in and starts shooting indiscriminately at people, trying to kill as many people as we. That's scary to me as a dad and a husband. To me, that's scary. I mean, it's unpredictable. You don't know when it's going to happen. While they do say there are signs of it, rarely is there a really good sign that it's about to happen. If you throw the same gang shootings in with those type of shootings, We had one quote mass shooting, if you want to use the implication that it's a random shooting indiscriminately of people. There's been one so far this year. One, only one in Iowa, Perry, Iowa, on the 4th of January. There's not been another one since then. But the gun violence archive has over 100 mass shootings categorized right now. People shooting, let me tell you something. I don't find myself at a basketball court at 2 a.m. in downtown Washington, D.C. That's just not where you're going to find me on a Friday night, Saturday night, or any other night. So I'll never be susceptible to one of what they call a mass shooting because I won't be there. Now, as far as one at a mall or a church or a school or something like that, who knows? Because those are unpredictable. But we can predict where a lot of these are that they're calling mass shootings. Out of 54, I believe, in January, 50 of those were gang related. One was the quote mass shooting. Three were domestic. That's how I break them down. I break them down by confrontation, domestic, and actual rampage shooting is what I call them. Not a mass shooting. I call it a rampage shooting. Those three categories: one rampage, three domestic, and 50 confrontational. We can identify the problem, but nobody wants to identify that because we know what backyard all of those 50 are in. Every single one of them, they're in the same areas, and they don't want to point the finger at themselves. So that's where I'm using the Gun Violence Archive's own data to form my own reports. And I create a spreadsheet at the end of every month that shows a pie chart and the breakdown of all these shootings that they're calling mass shootings.
Yeah, Paul, I would say that they like those high numbers. The other side likes those. They like those numbers. That's how they say we got to do something about all these guns. So they're perfectly happy to have a major lie, and they're happy to run with it and spread it as far as they can because it benefits
Yep.
their goal of civilian disarmament.
Yep.
Agreed.
Paul, we're
And I
getting some people saying that you're not loud enough for them to hear. So I don't know if you want to move your mic a little bit or adjust your volume. Um, One thing that I found kind of ironic is that the FBI's own number for mass shootings last year was significantly less than 100, and Gun Violence Archives was 460 something, and the Everytown number was even higher than that. So um, there's some disparagement there between a real mass
Disparity.
shooting, like you say,
yeah.
and yeah, disparity between the
Well,
real mass shooting and what they're sensationalizing as mass shootings.
you bring up a good point, and that's actually part of the problem. First of all, I think the FBI. I don't know if they actually call them mass shootings. I think they call them mass murders, where it has to be four or more people killed. I've created their own category of mass shootings. They don't call them mass murders; they call them mass shootings, where four or more people can be shot or killed, not including the actual shooter. Well, guess what? I could How does that become standard? I could create my own definition. This is not a formal definition. Nobody got together on both sides and said, all right, guys, we're going to identify mass shooting as this. These people said, we're just going to call it this. And exactly what Phil said, this is, I truly believe in my heart that this fun because it gives them a high number. If they said six people, guess what? Their numbers might be cut half. That to me shows you right there what they're looking at. Their goal was to get the numbers elevated.
Yeah, in fact, those numbers have been tinkered with before, Paul. As I recall, when they went back to justify the assault weapon ban in 1994 to 2004, they changed the definition of what a mass shooting was to six, I think it was the number you just said. And then it dropped down to four starting in 2004. So they could go, oh, look at that. We had less mass shootings and it was absolutely dirty pool. They completely changed how they did the formula and lied about it.
That's exactly right. And whenever I talk to Mark Bryant, who's the founder and director of Gun Violence Archive, um, and I want to be polite about this because Mark is supposed to come on my show and talk to me. So I'm trying to be as diplomatic as I can. But say that I don't believe the whole goal as to how they got there. When I asked Mark why they are including, clearly unrelated types of shootings, his message to me was almost that they want us to do the work. Like almost he's doing the work of compiling all of these, and that it's a good thing if we all are willing to break these down ourselves and look at them to determine where the real problem is. Well, guess what? If your database is being cited by all the main news outlets out there, they're not looking into whether or not I'm not a journalist, right? So I get it. These people are highly paid people that
Oh,
have way more investigative journalists out there that could do this work besides me, and not one of them has uncovered the fact that gang members are 88% of the quote mass shootings every month. Are you
uh,
kidding me? No.
you've got a lot more faith in modern investigative journalism than I do. I don't think I've seen investigative journalism since, maybe in the 80s.
This is true. This
Yeah.
is true.
They're not checking into anything. They just mimic whatever it is they want to say. There's a
You
few out there, but sadly those few aren't looking into this.
here's how, they say if you look for a problem hard enough you can find one. This is where uh, latched on to Gun Violence Archive. He actually took school shootings, excuse me, mass shootings out there, like out of the database a year or so ago, and immediately got massive blowback from all the major news outlets. CNN and everybody else lost their minds because they took that thing that they were eager to disseminate away from them, and he put it back.
Yeah. Well, I tell our members we're at war, and when you're at war, I mean, boy, all is fair. Apparently, you have to be prepared that they're coming from all angles. They're not playing clean, and we always try to stay clean with our facts. We like to do everything above board and everything, but boy, the other side doesn't go that way, and that can certainly put you at a disadvantage sometimes.
It does, and I've often complained about that we always seem to play by a different set of rules, and I think that we're guided more by morality and trying to provide good answers, because the last thing I want, and I truly don't want this, is I don't want somebody being able to poke a hole into my numbers,
Right.
discredits everything that I've done out there, not just that one video. Every video that I've done gets discredited, but it doesn't happen if you come from the other side. You can
No,
be you can blatantly lie and move on to your next story, and you're good. It's,
yeah,
everything's fine then.
it's a double standard. The other side has privilege with the press.
Right,
The
right,
press says, I try. We've even seen this in the General Assembly. Pat and I were sitting there and watching the other side in a committee throwing out all these numbers. Oh, there's 90% of gun owners want universal background checks and blah, blah. And Pat and I are looking at each other like, what? And then our side comes up, one lady comes up and quotes one statistic. Oh my God. Then the committee's in there. Well, where did you get that number? Tell me what your sources are. And it's like, yeah, of
right.
course, you're gonna rip her apart,
It's
but just ignore all the other crap that the other
Right.
side was putting out.
What did Marston say? 77,000 guns stolen out of cars last year, and I couldn't even find that number nationwide. I mean, he must have just pulled it out of the sky or something. But when they're going the other way, it's 10. The magic number is 10.
Yeah,
You know.
yeah.
right, right. And I'm okay with us holding ourselves to a higher standard, because to me, I can walk into an argument and feel like I've done my due diligence and I'm fine. I actually wrote a book a couple of years ago on the, if you want to call them mass shooters, but rampage killers. And I broke down how the culture, how they're developed, how their minds, and it goes in from a scientific study all the way into fatherless homes. I mean, it discusses several different aspects of it. And what I did was, and it was not something that I wanted to do because I'm not a journalist, but I have 254 footnotes in the back of the book, because I knew that if I put one of my own opinions out there, or something that came across as an opinion, that everyone would discredit the book. And the fact is, it's been taken seriously because they can't debunk anything. Not one person has been able to push back on one single.
And the other thing is, when you're talking about your diligence in doing this and your caution in trying to be above board, um, that's because our side doesn't believe that the ends justifies the means. that you get to the end you want by
Correct.
trampling over people, destroying their rights, not caring if people get murdered, all of that stuff. The other side doesn't have that moral block. They honestly don't care. As long as they get what they want, they will do whatever it takes to get there.
I truly believe that the anti-gun movement gets more of their facts, and I hope you guys can see that
Yeah.
facts from memes than they do books. It's a meme war for them. That's where they get all their information from. You can put out a really slick looking meme, and they will run with that hook, line, and sinker, but they will run as fast as they can from a book that has actual data in it or a website that provides data that they don't agree with. They want nothing to do with that.
Right.
Yeah. By the way, we have one person that creates our numbers, and that's John Lott. And of course, they've done everything they can to discredit him. I mean, of course, that he becomes a total victim of attack from every angle because
Right.
he's out there putting together statistics and numbers that aren't bogus that for the gun control side.
Well, it's a PR stunt for them as well. I mean, the majority of their spokespeople are all PR execs. Shannon Watts with Moms Demand Action. She
Mm.
has a background in PR. Um, Donna Dees Tamiasis with 1 million mom. What was it? 1 million mom march prior
The
to
Million Mom March.
Shannon Watts. Million mom march. PR
That
exec.
that
I mean, you just go down the line of them. Giffords. Nothing but PR exec. So
Yep.
they see those numbers. They see how that the advertising in it, and that's what they play off of. If they could sell emotions, then they've done their job. So they'll twist words and numbers all they want. So it's
well,
just
the other side. That's the one thing they do is that they create things that put an image in your mind that's probably got nothing to do with reality most of the time. But what you're talking about is that this is PR
Right.
or PR/BS.
Which is why I appreciate the way Paul calls it rampage
I
killer
like that. I like
instead
that.
of a shooter, because shooter focuses on the firearm and the tool
Absolutely.
used. But we know that rampage killers can use cars, they can use machetes, they can use gas, all sorts of different everyday items that are weaponized to become to attack people with.
But
So,
better than that, I like how he divided it into the three categories.
right.
You got your gang violence, confrontational, I think he referred to it as,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
then you got the rampage, and then you've got domestic, or what did you call the family, where somebody
Domestic,
kills their whole family, huh?
domestic,
Just
yeah.
domestic, yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, I actually, to my wife's chagrin, I'm actually writing a second book, and it's actually breaking down these types of and how we can actually solve the issue. Because if we continue to blame either a style of gun, how many rounds it has in it, what the caliber is, no one is serious about fixing or at least leaning towards trying to solve this issue and think gun violence issue in any kind of way. Again, I state that I'm going to send you guys a copy of my book, but I want you to read my book. One of the biggest things that I focus on is I worked for a utility company for 11 years. I was a regional manager, and we wasted so much money on stupid workshops and things like that. Just pointless stuff, team building exercise, silly stuff. There was one workshop that we ever did that I remember, and it had an impact on me. I was young. I was in my 20s whenever, and it was on root causes, and it explained how to drill down with something as simple as the 5 whys. And in my book, I talk about if your teenager is constantly wrecking their vehicle, you don't ask them the whys. Why'd you wreck the vehicle? I couldn't see very well. Why can't you see very well? I don't know. I think something's wrong with my eyes. So you can drill down to what the problem is. And I talk about that with the shooter, a person shooting a gun and killing people. If you ask what happened, somebody shot a bunch of people. Why did they shoot a bunch of people? Because the guy was crazy. And you go back from that. The gun will never come up. If you are serious about to identify the 5 whys, getting to the true root cause, the discussion of a gun will never come up. It won't come up that it wasn't stored properly. It won't come nothing. That This decided it wanted to kill, and then it sought out that gun. I don't understand why, and I do understand why. I understand more people don't see the lies that people are putting out there saying that, oh, the gun was the problem. We know that the left can't be that serious about the gun creating the problem, but I don't understand how the people who follow them don't see that it's a lie and that
You see,
it's
it's
trying to
baloney.
mislead them.
So if yeah,
Right.
I'm following down your logic there. So if there was a shooting, so you said why did all these people get murdered? Well, the guy had a gun. Well, why did the gun want to murder people? And
Right.
it's pretty much a dead end right there.
Right.
You
Well,
know?
and honestly, if somebody did say, if you said, "Why were all these people murdered?" and somebody said, because he had a gun, first thing you ask is, why did he have a gun? Because he wanted to kill people. Why did he want to kill people? And then you go down that
Oh
rabbit
yeah,
hole,
boom.
over
Going
medicated
with
or whatever. You're
yeah,
going to find the reasons after that. I'm not saying the gun can't be included in the conversation, but it's definitely not where you stop and say that was the problem.
Right.
yeah. But
Yeah.
that's where they
Sadly,
want to stop.
the people that are trying to take our rights away will they will come up with a point that they want to make, and then they will find ways to legitimize it. In other words, they'll take a survey and they'll weigh the survey participants, that they'll skew the results by only surveying a certain demographic. And that way they can say 90% of the people surveyed said that they want this particular thing.
Right, right. Well, I live in Lake Charles, Louisiana. I'm 20 miles from the Gulf of
Hmm.
Mexico. If the New York Times puts out a poll or a survey, I know it didn't take place in South Louisiana. So I'm pretty sure it's not going to be the demographic of people that I run with. And I'm
Mhm.
pretty sure they walk outside their office and ask passerbys. I mean, let's be honest. Statistically speaking, do you think there's going to be a whole lot of people that don't support gun control walking in front of the time building? Of course there is.
Right. And anybody that took statistics in school knows that you can make a statistical survey show anything that you want it to show if you ask the right questions to the right
Right.
people.
Yep.
If I went to a gun show, I would bet that I walked away from there with 100% of Americans don't support gun control.
Hmm.
That's
Yep.
my survey, right?
Right. And the question matters. If you say, do you want all of these guns that you have to be outlawed, then the gun owners are going to say no. But if you say, do you want this type of gun to be not able to be used in a mass murder, then they're going to say yes.
Right.
So it's all in how you phrase the question.
Yep. And that's a good point you bring up because that's how they have on quote background checks because they
Hmm.
ask people, do you think we should have background checks for
Right.
all sales? The people are thinking, of course, when I think you go down to Academy or wherever to buy your gun, or yeah, I'm okay with background checks, and they know that we have them. Well, then they take that same message and say that people think you should have background checks on every gun. Oh, that's universal background checks. So 90%
Right.
of America supports that. That's a lie. It's exactly what you
Right.
said. It's the question you asked to get the answer you wanted to get.
Yeah. At
Now,
some
on the
point,
other hand, if you say, are you okay with having to prove your innocence before you exercise a constitutionally protected right? Most people are going to say no.
Right.
So, to me, a background check is a presumption of guilt until you prove your innocence, and you have to pass a test every time you want to exercise a constitutionally protected right.
Correct.
But it's all in how you phrase the question.
Well, and the
yeah,
wording
and
on the
so,
red flag gun laws are probably the most disingenuous to me because they ask those questions. If somebody is going to kill a spouse or a bunch of people, do you think they should have the guns taken away? Well, if I knew that without a doubt, like I knew without an actual fact, not a supposition, like if I had a
Hmm.
crystal ball and I knew that person was about to kill a bunch of people, yeah, if we could magically take his guns away, that would be awesome. But you can't. You don't have a magic crystal ball. You don't know what that person's going to do. You can assume
Exactly.
really, really strongly, but you don't know what's going to happen any more than I do.
Mhm. Now, with some of this stuff, it just, the argument about like ARs, you got our side pointing out it's a modern sporting rifle. We got the other side saying it's an assault rifle. And I've gotten to the point with that, for example, with that issue, I say, call it whatever you want. I don't care what you call it. You want to call it an assault rifle? It's not, but knock yourself. I am constitutionally protected in owning one of those. So it doesn't matter what you call it. I can have one. So call it what you want. I'm moving on because it's protected by the Constitution. And sometimes that's the way you have to handle a situation like that because they're not going to change their terminology, and somehow they think that's going to change the world. And they need to learn that that is something that's, the Supreme Court is not going to let an assault weapon ban go down. I don't see that happening. Not with the most popular rifle in America.
Excuse me. I think that exactly your point is when they create a new word that's not an actual word or an accurate word, it's easier to throw things into it as you go along. You can change that definition because you've made the word up anyway, right? So you've seen this in some latest legislation in Congress where we know what they're usually implying, which is an AR-15. Now they start sliding in all the other semi-automatic shotguns, handguns, and all that. Because guess what? It's their term. They made it up, so they get to make up the definition now. And people just quietly go, "Oh, they might be talking about AR-15s," and they're not. That's where they slide in all those semi-automatic guns.
That's what they did this year. It used to be, you had to have two features, like one of those bayonet lugs that we all dread and fear. You had to have that, and you had to have a muzzle brake. Wow, so you had to have all this stuff. Now they've made it one item. So if you've got a detachable magazine, doesn't matter the size, could be a one-round detachable magazine, and you have any of the other one of the other features. That's now the new assault rifle because they figure that they're looking for trying to get their foot in the door with something that people will go, yeah, nobody needs that. Then when they ban that, then they're going to, we know they'll just keep moving. Ultimately, they're going to want to disarm us completely. I think where we're headed is semi-autos is where they're trying to go. So at some point, they're going to say, yeah, just can't do semi-automatic. That's just too fast. Bolt action's okay. Lever action's okay. Pump action's okay. And then eventually those will get weeded out too. So, but it's a matter of terminology, um, and PR, as was mentioned earlier. So, I think Jill hit the nail on the head with that.
If you're having trouble seeing me, my power went out. So.
Oh, boy, yeah, I thought you were a blackface.
Yeah. I'm trying to get my mobile hotspot to connect to the computer, but
This is country living, folks.
Well, this wind, like I said, with all of the wet ground and the wind, I was fully expecting trees to come down. So,
yeah.
If you lose me, I'm sorry. But I'm running off of I got a Wi-Fi hooked to yeah, there we go. I've got a Wi-Fi hooked to a power supply. Yeah.
Okay.
So
yeah, you have a UPS. You got a universal power supply. Yeah, good.
Yeah, so we'll see how long that lasts.
Okay.
So we may end up cutting the meeting short tonight.
Yeah.
But
I have a
anyway,
whole house generator, and consequently, we never lose power just because I have the generator. The talisman against power loss doesn't get used. So let's see. Yeah, I guess we may have to kind of move things along. I don't know how long your UPS is going to last. Mine usually lasts about 15 minutes.
Yeah, well, that's the only thing running on it right now, so we might get 30, but we'll see. Anyway, yeah, great stuff with your research into the gun violence archives, and I'm really curious to see if he does actually come on to your show. I want to see what he's got to say.
Yeah, send us a link if he does that. I'd like to look at that and maybe share with our members.
Well, and I'm continuing down the shootings every month now that they've changed the title of school shootings. uh, it's not. I'm not really debunking it now. Now that they named school incidents, so probably won't focus on that one as much. But I was intending to break them down monthly, both of those categories. So mass shootings is probably what I'll break down from here going forward, starting in March.
Well, incident even bothers me because an incident, where there was maybe no harm intended. Some kid brought a backpack to school and didn't know that, or forgot that there was something in there. Didn't mean to harm anybody. Is that really an incident? I don't know. To me, it doesn't seem like it. If they found out the kid was planning on hurting people, that would be very different.
I was about to say that goes back to the level
Well,
of
probably the
five
ones that
whys.
bother me more than anything on their report is the ones that are two 23-year-old men fighting at a parking lot at a university halfway across town, but it just happened to be on university property at 2 a.m. in the morning. Those are the ones that are, I mean, when you imply a school incident, you think of your children, right? You think of your kids going to school, not a 23-year-old man. And that's where I kind of have a problem with the incident stuff too, because why is it even in there?
Yeah, something happening at 2 a.m. counts just like it would if it was at 2 p.m. as well. They've had cases like that where there was some kind of a shooting right near a school, but nobody was there. It was, early morning hours. Nobody's around, and yet that would count.
Well, it's
So
like
they,
the
they
guy, I think in Billings, Montana, that had his shotgun across the street in his own yard for whatever reason. I don't know the full reason behind it. 2 weeks before school started, and they locked him up for it because he was technically in what they called a school zone. And it was 2 weeks before school even started in August. I think I'm losing y'all's audio.
yeah, I'm adjusting mine. Somebody drew well, but I don't know. I haven't touched anything. Let me see it. Somebody said it was overdriven, so I'll check and see if I can turn that down. Things kind of got funky when Pat's computer went on
Yeah.
external power.
I'm not sure we're going to get her back this time.
Oh, well, if she goes down, this whole thing may go down. So if we just disappear into the ether, that's what happened. I'm still trying to get my sound control up here. Okay. Output. Okay. Okay, I can. I'm trying to adjust um, the amplification on my microphone, but doesn't really let me do much with that. I'm going to switch it to something else and come back and see if that's any better. Okay. Testing. Is it sound just as bad as before? Can you guys hear me?
I can hear you.
I think.
You sound all right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Um,
I actually hear Paul better now.
okay.
Yeah.
So you're down in Louisiana. I was wondering where you were.
Yep.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Jill.
Do you mind repeating the name of your book? I have some people in the chats on YouTube and I think on our Facebook streams.
It's How to Make a Monster. If they're interested in it, there's several ways they can get it. Howtomakeamonster.com is one way, but they can also get it on Amazon and Kindle books. So there's several ways to get it.
All right.
Yeah, I think that's information that anybody that's fighting this fight to protect our rights probably needs to be well aware of, as we have to understand where these monsters come from, and because that's the problem. And if there's a solution at all, it's how we stop producing them. Because I know when I was growing up, the concept of a school shooting, I'd never heard of that concept all the way through high school. Never ever once came across my radar. And I lived in Chicago. No, nothing. Um, that all started in the when they started putting the drugs in the schools for one thing, and I'm sure that's part of what makes the monsters out there. I'm sure there's a lot more that your book goes into.
Yeah, definitely. It's honestly if you look at, and it's all spelled out in the book, but one of the things that probably that scale was not only the introduction of the psychotropic drugs, and I probably said 50 times in the book. I'm not implying that people who take a mood altering drug somehow becomes a rampage killer. It's the three things that I identified there that come together and they're more susceptible to it. Not that
Right.
they're prone to tomorrow they're going to be that, but the No Child, oddly enough, No Child Left Behind kicked a lot of this off on over medicating our children
Hmm.
because they began to start teaching for a test, and teachers could not individually teach students. They teach those children, and of course, the school and including the teacher with her own pay or his own pay, they were graded on the outcome of those test scores. And I say in the book, and this is a fact. I'm not saying that it can be quote corrupt, but anytime you start affecting the amount of money that puts food on people's tables with what somebody else's performance is, not own somebody else's. In other words, if Johnny gets a bad score on his test and that affects my pay, I'm going to figure out a way to make Johnny get a better score on that test. And
Yes.
they passed a law back then during No Child Left Behind, excuse me, that allowed teachers to christen a child ADD, and that put them as a what's the best I can as at a disadvantage to learning, like learning disabled sort of. Without going into a special education class, you could earmark those children as learning disabled, which meant now you could get them a tutor to teach for the No Child Left Behind test, and you could spend more time on the test. So they started realizing that if we can make these kids ADD, stop them from being bouncing all over the place, which means medication, then we can try to corral this problem. And now they were shutting schools down. They were defunding a lot of these schools. They were giving all the money from this grant program from No Child Left Behind to the high performing schools and taking it for the low performing. It was hurting people financially. And again, I'm not justifying finding that work. The saying is, you've got let's call it a single mom who's a teacher. She's got 3 kids. She's barely making ends meet. Now, her pay is dependent on what every kid in her class makes on that test at the end of the year. I can see people doing things to be able to put food on their table for their children.
Sure. And people are very much driven by motivation, and money can be a motivator. And in essence, they're almost set up to have to go this way. It's almost like it was
Correct.
planned that teachers were going to twist their arm.
Yep.
It's kind of like during COVID, the government wasn't enforcing masks. What they did was they went to stores and said, if you don't enforce this, we're going to pull your business license. So they gave that store an incentive to become a mask Nazi. And it was pretty dirty. But again, you can manipulate people with money, and you can do so knowingly. And I wouldn't be surprised if
Sure.
that child left behind thing was that wasn't an intentional outcome of that.
Yeah. Yeah. The numbers of children on medication, I think it grew by 10 times the amount before No Child Left Behind.
And the danger is with some of these medications is they seem to have an effect on a person's empathy, to where a child, if you lose your empathy, you have no sympathy for if you're harming somebody, you can't suddenly say to yourself, oh my God, I wouldn't want to put myself through that. I know what they're doing. I would never.
Right.
But if you don't have that, if that's not a part of your brain, now you're no better than a shark out there hunting a prey. You have no sympathy for the shark. I mean, for the prey that you're eating. And I think that's got a lot to do with it. That's how these kids can do so much in cold blood and doesn't seem to bother them.
Well,
That's just not normal human behavior.
all of the psychotropic medications, every one of them, not some of them, all of them, have a black box warning from the FDA. And one of these side effects is mania, anxiety, suicidal tendencies, uh, homicidal tendencies. Those are listed as
Yeah.
side effects.
Right.
Yes.
So, I mean, it's not a secret. I mean, it's not like I dug it up. I mean, it's out there. It's just that people are okay with, I guess, rolling that dice, and take it. And again, this is not to imply that everybody that takes them is
Right.
going to be a killer. I'm not saying
Right.
that, but there are it's hard to ignore where all these things. I'll just tell you right now that a broken home, over medicated, and bullied. Those are the three things that every single rampage, every single
But
one.
from
I go and look
but
at
from
every
what you're
single one of them and break down their history. They all have that.
well, then what it is we've had bullies forever. We had bullies when I went to school in the 50s and 60s. We had broken homes. Luckily, I had the opposite. I had a great family life, but a lot of people had broken homes. But we didn't have this. Well, people didn't
Correct.
kill each other. Students didn't kill each other over things. They might get in a fist fight, but they didn't kill each. Never even thought about killing somebody.
Right.
So I think what we're saying here, that dynamic is a real problem. But when you add drugs on top of it, it's kind of like the nuclear bomb. You have to get two big enough pieces of uranium to hit each other before you have enough to make an explosion. And so here you
Right.
had two components, and then a third came in, and that was sort of like the fuse that with everything else triggers it. Now, again, that may not mean every case. There's probably people with that aren't like this. But it's interesting, isn't it, that this
Yeah.
stuff really took off. And that, to me, that kind of explains a lot. That, because we did have bullies, and the bullies were people that sometimes would end up with people really hating them badly and appropriately in many cases. So I think that's it. We were missing a fuse that basically put the brain in some altered state where suddenly murder was fine.
Right.
Well, and we also have, just like we've had bullies, we've had people that were bullied, but power, um,
Ooh,
miracles. We we today, I don't know. We kind of make excuses for people, and kind of enable people to use a disadvantage as a poor, pitiful me. I'm a victim, and we almost sensationalized victimhood instead of helping people work through it and use it to learn from and grow by. I mean, I was picked on a lot when I was in school because I was different. I didn't conform. I'm a nonconformist and always have been. But I didn't go out and murder people because of it. It became a part of me and helped shape who I am today. And today, I don't mind being different. I embrace being different from other people. And it helps me get up and talk in front of committees and at meetings and things like that because I'm not as self conscious about it, but I just learn from it.
That's the same thing. Like me growing up, I went to school with guns, and we would, like we've talked about it before, going to school, high school, and even grade middle school. Driving to school and having the racks. I can't get that out of my mouth right now. But having the gun racks in the back with our rifles in there. Sometimes we were allowed to come in and check our rifles in with the school resource officer and have him, designate a locker to us. And we were bringing firearms to school. Never an issue. Those guns were right there. None of us cared to go in and throw a big fit and or become a rampage killer. So it's just kind of like, I, I'm. There is a very big lapse in some sort of logic and reality as far as where we are today with our youth versus where we were back then when we were growing up. Because there's a difference. There's a different, as Pat said, there is a coddling of victims. It's allowing them to sit in that and dwell in their victimhood, that, or even try to make more. And I, dare I say that, but it's like we're not really building them up to as problem solvers and solutionaries. I guess that's the best way of saying it, to bring in Black Guns Matters, Maj's terms. I mean,
Right.
we're not building up these young people to figure out their problems and get over it, so to
No,
speak. And
the idea, the
go ahead.
idea, Jill, is the government is the one that's going to provide the solutions, right?
Right.
It's ridiculous, and I see that
Yeah.
as a mom. I have a young son, 7 years old, and just seeing that that could be a possibility of a lifestyle for him is scary. It is scary as hell. And I'm just sitting. I sit here and I listen to this, and I think to myself, I'm like, all right, I'm growing up. We never had issues with guns. I grew up with a ton of guns around me all the time. My dad was a police officer. He was also a hunter, an avid hunter. And we knew that if we even looked cross at a firearm, we've already had that in, that education instilled in us that we would have our butts beat if we we went and got one without permission, or at least without some sort of supervision. And
Right.
we were, there was a level of responsibility that we had to build up to around those firearms in order to have one for ourselves. And the same thing can be said with any responsibility for kids today. Nowadays, I mean, they're so unaware of what's happening around them unless it's right there in front of their face on their screens of their phones and computers and stuff like that. And that is, as a mother, that's scary for me because I don't want my kid to. And let's put it this way: I actually want my kid to be the outsider, because I don't want him to conform to this kind of. Sorry if I sound like really ramped up about it, because this is something that hits home, especially as being a parent. So it's wild to me. I'm on the edge now. So it's just so wild to me. So just hearing about, and thinking about exactly what y'all are talking about as far as the drugs, pharmaceuticals, whatever you want to call them. I call them drugs. Um, just the behavior where, like Phil was saying, we had bullies back in the day, and I'm not that much younger than Phil, but we had bullies back in the day. But there was a way we overcame that. We still overcame that. We did not dwell in it to a degree that it was like some sort of weird retaliation. It was just like we worked it out somehow, and we were latchkey kids. A lot of us were latchkey kids. We didn't have mommy and daddy there all the time to discuss our problems. We usually had just to figure it out by ourselves. And I just think about, it's really sad where we have come as a society and we see our children suffering so much, but yet at the same time we are empowering them, excuse me, to become activists and politically, of all things. And it just it just blows my mind so much. So
Yeah, and a lot of them becoming political activists without understanding the world very well.
exactly, and I think that that's where I am touched most of this from this conversation, because I don't want it to be something that keeps on, for the
Yeah.
youth as of present and future, but also especially because, like I said, because I'm a mother, I don't want to see my kid having to go through school and the only way he could get an A is if he becomes a gun control activist, so to speak. So
Right.
I
Yeah,
mean,
they're pushing that
that's
stuff.
that's exactly what it feels like.
Yeah.
And instead of actually looking at the whys, as Paul brought up, and going from there, I think that
Yeah,
we
yeah.
are.
As the parent, you've got to somehow intercede where the school's leaving things out. Somehow you've got to be the
Yes.
one that stands up and educates your child. Paul, I think you said originally you might have a conflict on time. How are you doing on time?
Uh, Anytime anytime you guys are ready to let me go, I'll probably need to get out of here.
Okay, well, I'm gonna move on to legislative stuff in Virginia, which would probably put you to sleep anyhow. But we had the governor do some vetoing, and he modified one of the gun control bills and had me laughing. So anyhow, how that happens, I'll have to explain to everybody. But yeah, I think I really appreciate you coming on. Look forward to looking at your book, because I think that sounds like that there's definitely stuff in there we need to understand, especially those of us that are dealing with the other side regularly.
Sure. Yeah, Pat, if you'll send me a mailing address, I'll get some books out this week.
Nice.
Awesome. Will do. Yeah, thank you so much for coming on, Paul. Sorry about all the technical difficulties,
Okay.
but
That's okay.
anyway,
You guys having me.
yeah, look forward to doing it again sometime, and look forward to seeing the guy from Gun Violence Archives on your show.
I'll
Yeah.
let you guys know
Yeah.
if it shows up.
Okay,
All
and
right.
there'll be a link to this in case you wanted to link to show people or whatever.
Yeah, Paul,
Yeah.
it's going to tell you to leave the window open for a while. You can turn your camera off and your microphone off, but it'll upload your video so that we can, it'll have the decent sound. We can repost
Okay.
it with better sound.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Have a good night.
Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about legislation. And I was driving to the range today, and I got a phone call from a gun dealer who, had my number, which my cell phone, which is fine. I give it out to a lot of people. And he called me while I was on the road and said, "Well, I got somebody at my store here, and they said that the person's telling me that Governor Youngkin signed the assault weapon ban bill." I well, I won't repeat what I said, but basically implying that wasn't true. But
Right.
so he put me on speakerphone, and I just said, "Yeah, no, absolutely not." I haven't even arrived on his desk. So maybe it's on his desk today, but we're not going to probably know anything about that for a while. But for those of you that may have heard that rumor, I don't know where that guy. I should have asked him where he heard that. That's absolutely not true. So. And I haven't looked today because I've been went to the range to get a break here and do some shooting, but I'll check a little later. As of last night or whatever it was, at 1 a.m. or whatever, it was the only three bills that they showed were the three that he's already acted upon. But there will be a bunch of them. There should be like 33 more that are going to his desk. Now, the first three were sort of an anomaly. They were processed and through the system so fast that they came in well with a week left, 7 days left before the end of the session. And because of that, there's a rule that the governor has to act on it in those 7 days. But if the bill comes in a little bit later, where he doesn't have a full 7 days before they quit for the for the year basically, except for 1 day when they'll come back to override vetoes. Except for that, and that's where all the other bills came. They all way too late getting to his desk, so he's got until mid-April to act on them. And my experience with this is he's probably not going to rush out and act on them all tomorrow. I know some people were really sweating that, it was already Wednesday and he hadn't acted. I just said, relax. They've got time to do this stuff. It's not an urgent thing. And sure enough, I think it was Friday, which was the last day, around 7 p.m. or something, or 8 p.m. It finally came out. And not surprising at all. I've seen that over with whoever's been governor. I've watched this stuff come out. So with the assault weapon ban and all that stuff, don't be hanging, we're just waiting for me to tell you that he's vetoed all that stuff. It'll probably be a while before he does anything with it. He's got a full month. They usually take that amount of time. It's not just gun bills. Oh man, he wishes it was just gun bills. He's got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of bills in all different subjects that he's got to go over and decide if he's going to sign them, veto them, or not sign them and let them become law. We don't have a pocket veto for the governor. He has to act. If he doesn't act, it becomes law. If he acts, it becomes law with his blessing and his signature. If he vetoes it, then they try to override it. And as I've told everybody, they have zero chance of overriding a veto. Okay, if he vetoes a gun bill, it's dead. There's no way they're going to get enough Republicans. He'd be lucky to get one or two Republicans. He would need a way more than that, and it's not going to happen. So he did act on the three bills. He vetoed two of them, which were basically identical bills, where one was a House bill, one was a Senate, but they were really the same thing. And again, that's not unusual for that to happen. In the 33 that he's getting, there's a bunch of duplicates. So that's not unusual. So he vetoed two, and when he vetoes it, he gives a reason. He has a little letter that goes with it. It explains why he vetoed it. As opposed to just killing it and not telling anybody why, he explains why. On the one that he did change, that one I'll read to you, and this will be in an alert. This probably Monday or Tuesday. I'm going to. Okay, Pat's put it up on the screen. She's like radar. They're always ahead of the power curve. Anyhow, this one, what the governor did was, I'll read it to you. That the provisions of the first enactment of this act shall not become effective unless reenacted by the 2025 session of the General Assembly. That's the least interesting part. What that says is, and this is the law that requires parents to be notified about the gun laws, dealing with children getting their hands on guns, how to talk to other parents about guns, all kinds of advocacy stuff in there, statistics on gun deaths, all this crap that they put in there. So he said it won't become effective until next year if the General Assembly repasses this bill exactly as it is now. Then he added one other provision, and this is the one that had me kind of laughing. The Department of Education, and so they have to do this. If they want this bill to become law, they have to agree to this addition. The Department of Education shall collaborate with relevant stakeholders to create a list of parental rights, including the right to be notified of sexually explicit materials, to express disagreement with the school's or a school board's policies or decisions, and to make decisions concerning the upbringing, education, and care of the parent's child, and parental responsibilities, including safeguarding their children against access to drugs, ensuring their child is protected from exploitation or abuse, maintaining their child's school attendance, participating in their child's school discipline proceedings, monitoring their child's behavior and educational process, and, if applicable, paying child support. And then he talks about one of the Department of Education shall create a standard for this information to be disseminated. So I thought this was great. I thought that was absolutely great. He said, okay, if you want to do this, and there's a whole lot of other things that parents need to be made aware of if we're going to do this. And so we'll see what happens with that. So the General Assembly can go ahead and say, all right, we're going to roll over and take this. We're going to go ahead and accept that. Then next year they have to pass it again exactly in this format. And if they do, then it becomes law. It shouldn't have to go back to the governor's desk because he's already said it's okay if you do all of this. If they so much as take out one part, one word, then the bill is dead. So they either take it on as a whole or they don't. So we'll see what they do. So what was interesting is Pat and I sat there and suffered through listening to the whole session on Saturday when they normally would have taken up those three vetoes or the two vetoes of the change. And instead, they didn't take up any of the vetoes for all the bills. There were like 84 bills out there. Didn't take up any of it. And then what they did was they pushed it off until the veto session, which is the one day they come back to try to override all the vetoes. And that's going to be April 17th. So on April 17th, we'll find out what they're going to do with the vetoes. Although, again, I am absolutely not going to lose any sleep that they're going to override any of those. But what are they going to do with this change? And I wouldn't be surprised if the governor doesn't put in a couple of other changes in some other bills. So we'll see what happens. But again, let's not make sure if you hear somebody saying the governor signed the assault weapon ban or he hasn't. We even had a candidate that had run, I think, for governor once, putting on Twitter that, those bills should have been vetoed by now. And if he was the governor, he would have vetoed them. I had to put back on Twitter and say, wait a minute, a governor can't veto a bill till it lands on his desk. None of those bills are on his desk. He can't veto it. So
Right.
don't blame him for that. And I said, and also, there is no hurry. Nothing is going to happen until, April 17th. And even then, nothing is finally going to become law until July 1.
Right.
So
Now, in the meantime, it is time to contact the governor and ask him to veto all of these bad bills that have landed on his desk now. And there's a QR code on the screen you can scan to send a message to the governor. You can also find the link on our homepage, vcdl.org. There will also be postcards at the gun shows for the next couple of weekends. You can sign the postcard and leave it right at the VCDL booth. We'll put a stamp on it and mail it for you to make sure that it gets to the governor. So
some gun stores are going to have them too. So you might check with your gun store to see if they have any of those cards. But some of the bigger ones, like Green Top and Colonial Shooting Academy here in Richmond, and a lot of the gun stores out in the Roanoke, the Tidewater, will have them if you want to drop by and fill one of those out. As of right now, the governor has gotten 8,605 emails. And again, we're working 10,000 postcards, so we're hoping to have 10,000 postcards on top of whatever we come up with. But we should be able to do better than 8,600. That's a lot. Don't get me wrong. I wouldn't want to be the recipient of that over a couple-day period. But there are 700,000 permit holders. My question to them is, where are you? How can there be 700,000 and 8,000 emails sent? How's that possible? And not to mention that we've got at least 2.5 million gun owners, maybe as many as 3 million. I know a lot of them are asleep, but so if you know some of those people, you need to wake them up and get them to send in that email. And by the way, originally when the system was put up to send those emails for you, there was a preference that was set that I didn't set. It was set in the system, and we didn't even really know it was a preference that was asking for everybody's phone number because it had a box that was checked that said, send me email alerts. Send me text alerts. And if you uncheck that, then it didn't want your phone number, but it had to get your phone number if the box was checked because you're asking to get text alerts and you can't do that without a cell phone. So that's why it was asking, but a lot of people didn't understand. They were frustrated. I don't want to give my phone number. Why are you making me do it? So I finally found the preference and I turned it off. So now new people that are signing up won't see that. They can put in their email. If they want to get text in the future, they can check the box, put in their cell phone. But at this point, they have to opt in to do that. And so we fixed that. If I would have known that was going on, I would have fixed it in the beginning. I had no idea. It was a brand new system. And I just didn't realize that was a preference. Anyhow, that's been fixed. If some of you got frustrated, a year ago when we were using it, or not a year ago, but previously when we were doing something during the legislative session and gave up on it, go back and try again and make sure that the box should be unchecked about text. If it's not, uncheck it, and you won't need to supply a phone number.
Yep. So there was a video. If you go to YouTube on the live tab, you see the video from last week where we talked about all the bills that are headed to the governor. And by the way, one of the bills, when you talk to people that maybe are a permit holder and really don't care about gun rights, it never occurred to them, let them know one of the bills that's headed to the governor that he needs to veto is one that would destroy reciprocity.
Yes.
It is directing the Attorney General to look at all of the other states whose permits that we honor, and if their laws aren't at least on par with ours or stricter, then he's supposed to cancel reciprocity with those states that we don't honor their permit. And a lot of states, if you don't honor their permit, they won't honor yours.
Yeah, so that's going to hurt you if you're traveling. So yeah, be sure and let the permit holders know that. There was a couple pieces of good news. The bill that would have made it so that you couldn't carry concealed in a restaurant, that bill died. Um, and so that bill's not having. He would have vetoed it anyhow, I'm sure. But that bill isn't even headed to the governor's desk. I don't know. These things don't die by accident. I have to believe that the Democrat leadership looked at that bill and said, either it's a hot potato, we don't want to touch it, or there's a lot of Democrats, including legislators, that have concealed carry permits. Some of them may have said, wait a minute, why are we doing this? Now you're telling me I can't carry in a restaurant? I don't think so. And so there may have been a reason like that. We don't know the reason. But that bill was left behind in a committee. It just died for lack of a full committee vote. The subcommittee said, yep, let's go for it. And then the full committee never met again. And so the bill died. The full committee had to meet and vote it out. If they really wanted that bill to come out, that full committee would have met just for that one bill, and they didn't do it. So that tells me it was a bridge too far for some of them. So that's good. So that anyhow, that's one piece of good news. There was another bill too that died, and that was I don't know if there's a counterpart. I'll have to look, but one bill that died was one that I think made it harder to find a person to do a concealed handgun permit course by taking out the NRA certified, USCCA certified instructors from the list. There may be one that did make it through. I'm not sure. I'll double check, but one of them for sure, Bill SB 522. 522. What happened with it? It passed the House and it passed the Senate, but it passed one of them slightly differently. One of them modified it. And when that happens, they pull together a little thing called a conference committee that's got 3 senators and 3 delegates, and they try to work out a compromise. The committee never met. And when they didn't meet, the bill died. So I'm sure it wasn't an accident. Again, they may have looked at it and go, it's not worth it. So we'll watch in case there's a counter bill up there. I'll have to look see if there's another one that did that. But I think we're safe. So, but that's the good news. The bad news is a lot of bad stuff. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. That bill in itself. I mean, and I think there might be one more. There's so many of them, but that bill would put a lot of us, myself included. I'm a USCCA instructor. That would put a lot of us out of a job. FFLs.
And you put a lot. You put a lot of money into becoming a USCCA instructor, didn't you? As I recall, that's not cheap.
I'm about to go through the first aid certification as well. So it's kind of like, if you can't reach out to me for a concealed carry permit, then that pretty much makes my whole existence, or at least my job, null and void. So if I have this slew of other information that I can teach you, I mean, you're not gonna. It's just not going to work out. I mean, so they've made it harder for us. NRA instructors, I'm not hating on them, but FFLs too. I was talking to a guy here in southern part of Virginia. He was like, it would hurt us as well, and I was like, so many jobs, so many people would lose their
and making it hard for the permit holder. All this stuff was making it to where it was going to be almost impossible to get a permit without spending a ton of money and a lot of time. And of course, who would that knock out of it? Would that knock out me or you or Pat? No. We could afford to pay more for a permit, but that would knock out poor people, which of course is what gun control was originally and still largely affects are the poor and so forth.
Yes, exactly. Because a lot of us instructors actually do outreach programs as far as teaching situational awareness. We don't charge an arm and a leg to do concealed carry courses for certain people. We have that ability to do that because it's our job. It's our business, and we can set the prices how we want. But when you give that ability to the government, which I think that bill wanted to do, like go through the DOJ or some kind of law enforcement
DCJS,
institution.
DCJS.
Yeah. So if you do that, you're going to have to pay an arm and a leg on top
Sure.
of having more waiting periods. And then you'll
Yeah,
have to go to their magistrate of choice to get it signed for.
yeah,
So
and
it's just,
DCGS didn't
I don't
even,
know if
they didn't even want it, Jill, when they were
it
asked,
was ridiculous.
we don't want to do this.
Right.
But,
They
but,
don't have programs for civilian for the concealed handgun permit. They're geared towards law enforcement and so forth.
But I think what happens with a lot of this is, they were all marching in line, all the Democrats pushing this gun control through. But I think in the end, and I think they were doing also a horse and pony show for the gun control groups, because you got Bloomberg contributing so much money. So they didn't want to show any weakness for fear they would lose Bloomberg's bucks and maybe some of the other gun control organizations' money or kudos. So they were just pushing this stuff along, even if they were holding their breath for some of it, because some of them are concealed carry permit holders. Louise Lucas's daughter, we know, is a concealed carry permit holder because she tried to carry a gun in the airport and got caught.
Not anymore.
But I think maybe now, class one misdemeanor. If her mama gets her off, her mama will probably twist somebody's arm politically to get her let off. But anyhow, but what happens is, I think what happens is at some point, some of them are looking at these bills going, okay, how can we make a few of these go away? I mean, without overtly killing them, how can we do this and keep face? And so that's what they do. They use some technical thing, like a committee just doesn't meet. And so nobody voted against the bill on their side. It just disappeared into the ether. Um, or a committee just didn't meet. Oh, sorry, we just ran out of time. We didn't have time to get the committee together. We wanted to pass your bill, but couldn't do it. I've seen all this before. None of this is new to me. It's probably not new to Pat.
Right.
But I think
Never
that
gets put on
explains.
a docket or, yeah.
Oh, yeah, it was a horrible thing. We goofed up. We're sorry, but just couldn't do it.
Right.
Yeah. We've been the recipient of some of that on the Republican side years ago. So
The politician's way of throwing poop on a wall to see if it sticks.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, we're throwing poop at you.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyhow, it's about 9:15. Pat, you got any questions that popped up? I don't know if you've had a chance to skim all of them.
No, I haven't seen any questions at all, actually, other than earlier on they were saying, how come we weren't showing up on YouTube? I think the algorithms are messing with us today. You had to actually click on the tab in the live section and then click on the video to get it. So, yeah, I did not see questions pop up in the thing. A lot of thanks to Paul for coming on tonight. Check out his channel, Legally Armed America, and check out the videos that he does. He started monthly now, going through what was posted on the mass shooting page and seeing how many of them are actually rampage shootings and how many are gang-related violence or domestic violence. So very interesting. Check him out the first couple of days of every month to see that. And he puts some good stuff up there. He digs down and gets actual facts. Imagine that. I wish our investigative reporters did the same. Jill, you sent us a thing earlier about the bills that went through, and it was a Washington area report, and so biased. I just cringed the whole time.
I think it was NBC. Yeah. I actually some people in I don't know if it was the Facebook or the YouTube stream that actually in the chat they brought up the NBC report. But yeah, it's very biased, and they spoke to a very I don't want to. I really hate to assume things, because there is a part of it where they spoke to a firearms instructor, and
Mhm.
he sounded very pro gun control in that article. I would like to know more before actually, labeling him as that. But at the
Yeah,
same
yeah,
time,
you got to be careful. They edit stuff. We know that.
yeah.
I've certainly been
Yes.
a victim of
Exactly,
that.
but they will twist. I mean, he could be very, and even myself, when I have, for Mom at Arms, when we've gone through some stuff, and done our own interviews, they've twisted some things. So I try my best not to assume or judge people too early on that one. But I would like to know more about him. He's a Virginia instructor, and that just, if he is pro gun control, I'm concerned. Um,
Yeah.
so
Why?
that would be wild. But yeah, it was a pretty biased article. If y'all check it out, it's like
Uh-huh.
news for um, Lori Haas. Lori
Uh-huh.
Haas is she speaks in it, and she gives her input, and it's pretty much, that's all it is you just hear about these Virginia gun control organizations and some national ones, and they have made a big stink about whether or not Governor Youngkin is going to veto any of the gun control bills. And we, of course, are praying that.
Oh, those poor little babies. As if we didn't get our
Yeah,
bills vetoed by Northam and by McAuliffe and by Kane.
exactly.
Oh, those poor little
And
babies. I feel so sorry for them.
the, but a plus is the VCDL is mentioned in the article, so that
Good.
will fill it.
They didn't interview
Sorry.
me. That would have been nice.
Exactly. And you're speaking to other firearms instructors in the state of Virginia. They didn't survey me on any of it, so
Yeah.
and it's just wild. But
Yeah.
um,
Well, that's the battle
so
we're fighting. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Now,
propaganda.
we might want to get some of the other names in gun rights that do their own channel and stuff. There's a lawyer out in Washington State that's been covering Virginia stuff and other stuff.
Uh-huh.
He's very good. Might be interesting to have somebody like that on, and maybe once in a while we get another personality on here. We've had Jared with Guns and Gadgets.
Right.
He always does a
Dan
great job.
Was.
Dan
Yep.
Wass.
And
I think it's
yeah.
good to have a chance to talk to these guys because, like us, they're dipped in the water of fighting gun control, and
Yep.
they may see some things from different angles, especially because they're focusing not on just on Virginia but on other states as well. It's always
Yep.
good to keep your eye on what's going on around you, even if it's not in Virginia. A lot of what we're getting here is what happened they did in California and
Uh-huh.
Washington State and Oregon. They take that wording, pick it up, and suddenly we've got a gun bill to match that here in Virginia.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah.
so, um,
I can't tell you how many people in the last few days have said, I'm considering leaving Virginia. And I'm like, well, where are you going to go? Because it's going to follow you.
it
You know,
is.
Yeah.
it's going to, if we don't stop it here, it will spread like a cancer.
Yeah.
And,
And it won't happen overnight, but it's coming. I mean, look at
mm-hmm,
things that have happened in Florida, Tennessee, Kentucky.
mm-hmm.
It's all around us. North Carolina, South Carolina.
Yep.
Um,
Just
they can
5
go
years
further.
ago,
Yeah.
5 years ago, people were saying it will never happen in Virginia. We will never
Right.
see gun control like that
Yeah,
in
and
Virginia.
people were coming to Virginia because of it. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it doesn't happen overnight, but again, you don't win a war by retreating. I'm sorry, but those people that are running, I'm saying you're retreating. Okay, you're not going to win. There's no way.
Yeah.
Right.
Eventually, you'd be on a little piece of ice floating off the coast of Alaska because
Mm-hmm.
nobody stood up to push back. I
Yep.
respect the people in Maryland that are still there fighting the good fight in Maryland. They've got a
Mm-hmm.
hell of a harder job than we do. I respect the people that are fighting D.C., New York, New Jersey,
Connecticut.
California,
Mm-hmm.
Oregon, Connecticut, all those people. I have a great deal of respect for them, and I'm glad that they're staying there and pushing back and fighting back and not retreating.
Yeah.
You
When
know?
Dan Wass was on, he made a comment about how bad they had it in New York. And I said, yeah, but you got us the Bruin decision, you know?
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
that's
And
true.
so
Yeah, it's a huge.
he was saying how great it was in 2020 at the lobby day in 2020 here in Richmond. And I said, yeah, but you guys are doing heavy lifting up there too. So
Yes, absolutely.
yeah, but you know, I will say to all of the people out there that have rabidly anti-rights senators and delegates, hound them. Pound them with emails and phone calls and letters. Don't say it won't have any effect, because if they get 1,000 emails, it is going to have an effect. So don't ever give up. Don't ever stop fighting. When you do, all is lost. But as long as you keep fighting and scrapping and breathing and demanding your rights be protected by the people we send to the legislature to protect our rights, then you've still got hope.
Yeah, you got
And
to be
yeah,
that little bulldog.
Cheryl,
Sure.
they may not respond, but they get the message.
Yeah, they
And
hear them.
the more messages that they get, the more that little voice in the back of their head says, I could be in trouble if I don't tone it down a little bit. You know, these bills that just magically didn't make it out of committee because they never got heard, that was because you guys sent those emails when we sent out the VA alerts and asked you to contact your representatives. Whether they were supportive or not, they got those emails and those bills magically disappeared. So
Yeah,
don't say it doesn't have an effect.
you might be able to alter somebody's mind, even though you may think they're absolutely anti-gun. If you can, you can hit that note occasionally. But I like to think, if nothing else, you want to be that little bulldog that's gotten a hold of somebody's pants leg and won't let go no matter what. They keep tugging and pulling and yanking. You kind of want to be that way. Otherwise, you're giving them a free ride. And that's what they want. They figure, oh, we want these people just to go away. If you don't go away, you're a thorn in their side. But you just be polite and keep educating them and keep pushing. We can't, because giving up is the equivalent of retreating. If you give up on your senator or delegate, you've retreated again. You don't want to do that. You're in the fight. You're going to stay in the fight. It's not easy. And believe me, I had one of the worst senators, Hashmi. I had her for 4 miserable years, but I went round and around with her aides. She wouldn't meet with me. She somehow always kept dodging that. She was just didn't want to meet with me, even in person. So, but I did go round and around with her aides, who were not very pleasant people, but we kept the battle up. So thank heavens she got redistricted. I'm sorry for those of you that got Hashmi that I had to give to you, but sorry about that. But I'm happy. I'm back to having people that represent me again. That's kind of cool.
Right,
But
but she's
anyhow,
still in office. She's
she
still
is
doing
still
the
in office.
damage.
So you people now have to pick up where I left off and be that little bulldog grabbing a hold of her pants leg.
Yep. The point is, don't ever give up.
No.
Because even though they may not respond to you, and even though you think it may not do any good, or they say that they believe this way or that way, it does have an effect, and it does make pocket vetoes happen, or bills just not get put on the agenda for a committee or things like that. So,
You can look in the mirror too, and you know that you're doing your part. You're doing all you can. Whether you actually make a change or not, you're doing your part. And I think that's important, that we're all part of this team and that we're part of the solution. And it's not just Pat or just me or the VCDL leadership with victories. It's you too, because you guys are what drives the train. At the end of the day, you're what makes it possible. So you're part of those victories when we have them. Absolutely.
That's how grassroots work.
That is how it works.
Do yourself a favor to, even if you have someone have a delegate, a representative that is pro-gun or whatever, that actually stands up for what you believe in. Hold them accountable too. Check in with them. Create a paper trail. Don't. It's funny to me. I actually had this realization, like when Northam was in office, I was every week emailing and calling to the point where I was on a first name basis with his aides. Um, so, and this was leading up to lobby day. And then when Governor Youngkin stepped into office, I felt myself, I was like, okay, I'm good. We're good. But coming to this session, this legislative session, I actually started to get that pit in my stomach. Like, I should have gotten on a first name basis with his aides, because even though I feel like you know, he sees my way of things. He sees my point of view. I can't become complacent and not holding him accountable to exactly what he says he's going to stand
Right.
up for.
And at the end of the day,
So,
when this session's over, we need to thank those that did it right.
Right. And
exactly.
that's what I was about to say is the people that are doing the right thing or that have your back, call them up and say, hey, man, I really appreciate that you've got my back.
Yeah.
And it when we don't get that kind of feedback, we feel like we're kind of in a vacuum. And so it's really hard to get in there, especially when you're in the minority, to get in there every day and know that the majority of the people listening to you are disagreeing with what you're saying. So when your constituents call you up and say, hey man, I know it's tough, but I really appreciate what you're doing, that fuels you and it keeps you in the fight.
Yeah.
So don't forget to say thanks.
Yeah, we'll probably have an alert go out to that effect. We'll see how all this thing shapes up sometime later in April. But I would think that if the governor properly vetoes all those gun control bills, he definitely needs to hear from us.
Absolutely.
So again, we'll see what happens. But I got my fingers. What I've seen so far is very promising. So we'll see.
All right, guys. It is 9:30.
9:30.
In-person meeting on Thursday, the 21st. So that is a week from this coming Thursday at XCal at 8 p.m. Show up early if you want to eat or shoot or just hang out and socialize. And we will see you then. And I will say goodnight. You guys saying goodnight?
Yeah. Good night. I appreciate everybody out there. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks for showing up and thanks for doing your part. We'll see you in the next one.